What's up everyone, welcome back to Just Finish Coding. In this Python video, we're going to be accepting a number and then printing it out backwards. So without further ado, let's get coding.
Just finished coding.
Now here's what your final program would actually look like. So you would have a text which says enter the number, and the user could enter any integer that he wants, let's say 876, and then the program would magically just reverse the number and then print it out onto the screen. Now in order to do this, I'm going to be using my PyCharm offline editor. But if you are comfortable using some other editors such as Idle or an online editor like repel.it, feel free to use those editors. Just make sure that you do know how to perform some basic functions like saving and running the program. So without further ado, now let's actually get into the code right here. So the problem says accept a number from the user and then print it backwards. So let's actually go step by step. So first let's actually accept the number, and in order to do this, I'm going to first give the user a cue to enter the number in. So I'm going to say print out enter a number. I think that's kind of simple and short. Okay, so now we're going to have the answer stored inside a value of n. So I'm going to say n is not equals to the input, but instead the int of the input. And this is basically going to convert your input, which is initially a string, into an integer where we can perform operations on. So the reason we do this is we want n as a number and not as a string. Now you might think we would have errors when the user does not enter a number and instead enters some random text, and you'd be right, and we will debug this later on. So right now you have n stored inside the int of an input. Now let's actually perform some operations on it. Now let me tell you right here that there are two ways of doing this. One is an inefficient way and one is an efficient way. Now in order to appreciate the efficient way, you first need to know how to do it inefficiently. Now if you are thinking right now, I don't want to do it inefficiently, you can feel free to skip ahead to the part in the video as I'm mentioning right here. But if you are still here, I'm going to assume that you want to learn more about how to do it inefficiently. And this is actually going to be teaching you a bit about how strings actually work. So let's go with our inefficient way first. Now, an efficient way is to have a bunch of ifs and elifs. So I'm going to say first if n is less than 10. Now in this case, n is going to be a single digit. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to say print n, because if it's a single digit, then well, why would we want to even bother? Because it's already our answer. So we don't print n, we print string of n. We first convert it to a string so that it does not create errors inside our print function. Okay, so next I'm going to say elif. Now if n is not less than 10, I'm going to check if n is less than 100. Okay, so is n less than 100? Now if it is, now here you need to do a bit of smart work. Now first I'm going to say n is equals to string of n, and this is going to convert the number into a string of values. Now in order to to understand what I'm going to do, you need to know how strings actually work. So if I have a number, let's just say 85, when I perform this line of code right here, if n is equals to 85 and I say convert n to string of 85, then what this is basically going to do is it's going to convert 85 as a number into 85 as a string like this. Now after this, how the computer actually holds this is actually in the form of characters inside a list. So this is what our computer actually holds the values in. So it's going to have 8 right here, and then it's going to have 5, both as single characters. Now we can actually access this list in Python, and now a list is kind of like an array. So the first index, which is this character, starts with an index 0, and the second one starts with an index 1, and so on. So in order to access this, I'm going to say print out n, okay, because n is actually the name of the string and also the name of our list where the computer is holding it. So I'm going to say n1 plus n index 2, and this would actually print out exactly what we need. So now I'm going to have another elif. So now let's just say n is less, it's not less than 100. We're going to check if it's less than 1000. So if n is less than 1000, then basically the same thing, except we're going to have n index of 2. I'm sorry, n index of, wait, what did we even type here? It needs to be n index of 1 and n index of 0, okay, not 2. I hope I did not confuse you there. Because this is index 1, this is index, I'm sorry, this is index 0, this is index 1. Okay, so now we're going to print n index of 2 plus n index of 1 plus n index of 0, and this is going to basically concatenate it together. And now when we actually try and run this program, it's going to say enter in a number. I'm going to say 129, and you can see it does work. It does actually print it out backwards. But the problem here is that the larger the number is, the more loops, not loops here, more if statements we actually need to build. And it makes absolutely no sense because we can only build a finite number of if statements, and this program would basically run on indefinitely. So this is not a good way of doing this. This is inefficient. This is stupid. I mean, it would make you no sense to put 1000 if statements like this, while we could actually code this in just a few lines of code. So delete all this right here, and let's actually get into the efficient code. Alright, so in order to understand the efficient code, you need to know how to use an operator called modulus. Now, modulus basically returns the remainder. So if we have a mod b, it's going to be returning the remainder when a is the dividend and b is the divisor. So if we have, let's just say 15 mod 10, we are going to have the return value of 5. I hope you get what I'm saying. So in order to fulfill our objective of this program, I'm going to have a variable called s set up initially to 0, and you'll understand what this variable does in a few minutes. So now I'm actually going to code the while loop and then explain what this does. So now while n is not equals to 0, and I know that may be very, very confusing, but trust me, I will explain it in just a few more minutes. So while n is going to be less than 0, I'm going to say r is equals to n mod of 10, and you can use mod by pressing shift and the 5 key at the same time. Now I'm going to have s is equals to s times 10 plus r, and just hold on here, I'll explain everything that's happening. Now I'm going to have n is equals to int of n divided by 10, right there. And at the end of this, I'm going to exit the loop, and I'm just going to print the value of s, okay, but not just s, the string of s, in order to fulfill the criteria of our print function. So let's actually test this out. Enter a number. I'm going to enter a huge number now, 48201, and now you can see it printed out 10284, which is exactly this number reversed. So this program accomplishes exactly what we need to do. Now let's actually get into the code, and let me explain to you what this does. So first we have a variable called s initialize, and s is going to have the reversed number inside of it. So you may be wondering right now why we have this n is not equals to 0, because n is initially the number we accept from the user. Now the reason we have n is not equals to 0 is because of this line of code right here. So this line of code is basically going to be holding the integer of n divided by 10. And in order to understand what this does, let me explain to you what this int function basically does. So the int function, which I used here as well, is basically going to convert whatever you have, whatever data type you have, into an integer data type. So if you have a string data type, it's going to convert it into an integer. If you have a float data type, it's going to convert it to an integer as well. Whatever data type you have, it's basically going to get converted into an integer. So now in order to understand this, what is going to happen if, let's say, n is going to hold a value such as 247. So now n is going to be equals to the integer of 247 divided by 10. And mind you, this is going to be returning a floating value, and that floating value in our case is 24.7. But when we use the int function, this is basically going to get converted into 24. Basically, it truncates everything after the decimal point. And this is exactly what we need to use in this particular program. So now you may think, okay, fine. So in that case, n is going to constantly keep reducing. The last digit is going to constantly keep getting truncated. But what about the code right here? What are these lines of code going to actually do? And I'm coming to that. So r is going to be equals to n mod of 10. And like I said, n is going to constantly return this line of code. R is going to hold the remainder or the result. So it's just the short form for that. So now when we have, in our case, 247 divided by 10, 247 modulus 10, this is going to return 7 because in this case our quotient is 24 and our remainder is 7. So this line of code is always going to return the last digit of the particular integer. So now we have the last digit stored as r, and now you may be thinking, okay, what does this line of code do? And this line of code is responsible for actually reversing the number. So when we have r, okay, we always want to add r to 10 times whatever our reversed number is. Okay, so our reversed number is going to be 10 times what it initially was plus r. So in order to understand this, let's actually go through our loop once where we have n is equals to 247. So initially n is equals to 247 and now we have r is equals to 7, and here like we said s is equals to 0. So s is going to be equals to 0 times 10 plus 7. So s is initially going to be 7, and now n is going to be 24 like I mentioned. Now again, n is still not going to be n is still not 0, so the loop it's going to loop right back. So now we're going to have r is equals to 24 mod 10. Now it's going to have 4. And now you can see s is equals to 7 times 10 plus 4. So now we have 74. And to think of it, our initial number was actually 247 and now we have 74. So this is basically reversing the number step by step. And that is exactly what we need to do with this program. So this is what is going to power this into place. So now you may be thinking, well, yeah, we do have a working program, but we still haven't debugged this. What if the user enters in a random bunch of characters? What if the user enters a negative number? Well, let's fix that right now. So first, what you want to do is to have a Boolean value inside a variable. I'm just going to call it correct. So initially, I'm going to have correct is equals to true. And now I'm going to have a while loop set up. I'm going to say while correct, okay? And I'm just going to copy cut this line of code here. I'm going to say try and paste this line of code inside the nested try. So I'm going to say try n is equals to int of the input except, and you want to just copy this down and I'll explain what I'm doing right here, except value error, in which case we'll be printing out you did not, I'm just going to say enter valid number. So enter valid number. There we are. In this case, I'm just going to say correct is equals to false. Okay, and we still have to do a little more debugging, mind you, but we will actually do that in a second right here. So now you can see when we have entered in a bunch of text, now it just says enter a valid number. Now how this code works is that we have this correct loop, which is constantly be happening unless this block of code actually executes. And this block of code would only execute if whatever the user entered was an integer. If it was not an integer, then this is what's going to sense it, this value error. And if it is not an integer, it's going to run into this condition right here. And it's just going to print out, please enter a valid number, don't enter the string of characters. Now, I hope you do understand what I mean. Now, what this error does not fix is if n is not a positive number, if the user enters in a negative number. How do we fix that? Not in order to do that, what we need to have is to have an if condition inside this. So I'm going to say if n is less than 0. Okay, in this case n is going to be negative. I'm going to print out the exact same code which we had inside value error, which is enter a valid number. Now, if it's not less than 0, it does mean that it's either equals to 0 or more than 0, in which case our operations would work out. So we're going to set correct equals to false, and now it actually exits the while loop with the correct value of n stored in it. So let's actually test this out one final time right now. So enter a number, negative 193. So enter a valid number. I'm going to enter some nonsense right there. Enter a valid number once again. Let's say 56. And now it reverses it and prints it all out. And this program is completely bug free. There's nothing the user can do to actually tamper with it. And this is perfect. This is exactly what we need to do. Now, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you do check out these two other videos that I'm going to link right here. So the first video is going to be finding the remainder using the modulus operator, and this is actually going to be teaching you how modulus actually works and how you can find the remainder even without using the modulus, and how Python actually works behind the scenes when you use the modulus operator. The second video that I want you to watch is going to be called the triangular sum problem, and it's going to be using kind of the same concept here with a while loop, except here we're going to have a little more complicated nested while loops, and here we actually solve a little more complicated problem. So make sure you check out those two videos, and in case you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell so that you're notified about all our future releases. We upload on a day-to-day basis, so there's a lot of content coming up. Thanks for watching everyone. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.